for this episode of the Weird Obscure World podcast.
I have been abducted.
Wait, what?
Their main forms they take are reptilian entities.
Please like, share, review, subscribe, and interact. Today we have a special guest. We have Les in. He's going to talk to us about Bigfoot.
Sasquatch. Wood booger, as I have found today.
The wood booger.
That name bothers me.
Well, that's where the booger for any gremlins, goblins. The Kentucky goblins were called.
It's like we don't even live on the same planet. We call them wood boogers.
Oh,
that's so weird. All right, weird news of the week.
The global warming has been blamed for the uncovering the bodies in the Himalayas of all the hikers, from all over ice sheets on
off of the out of the rainbow field and stuff.
Have all been thinning out to the point, and they're exposing more and more bodies. And Sherpas are bringing down on the average of 7 frozen bodies a week. Now, don't quote me on those exact numbers because it depends on who they're talking to.
Preserved.
Very well preserved.
That's bad because
like flash frozen mummies.
They use them as markers.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the rainbow field and many other wayward stops along the way are marked by the fallen hikers.
Yeah, they use them as markers. Like okay, we're going to hike to Jed today.
Yeah.
The blue coat. Oh man,
they're pulled down. I think it was the last 7 bodies that they pulled down were from a British expedition back in the late 60s.
Oh, okay, so double-edged sword. The families or the descendants of these people may want to have.
Well, and if I die hiking Everest, please leave me there.
Just leave me there.
Matter of fact, I'm going to wear a coat that I'm going to look like a greaser from the 50s. It'll have the name of who I am.
Yeah.
You know,
a flag sticking off of it.
Yeah, and
your top rocker will be Jared Anderson. The bottom rocker will be United States.
Yeah. Second of all, if I'm hiking Everest, why didn't you stop me? Because I'm not that stupid.
Yeah.
I've had a mental break.
Yeah.
No,
I don't know any better. You should.
Well, I could update my cancer plan.
Listen, your cancer plan.
I know it's sound. It's sound. My cancer plan is solid.
But I read a report of a guy who had nearly the same cancer plan, and after executing the plan, decided he wanted to live. It gave him a new reason to live.
Wanted a second night?
Yeah.
Okay, Everest might be my holdout
backup plan. So if you live, Everest it is. Jacket that says "Leave me here." I think the thing that I find the most disturbing about Everest is the amount of garbage that's left behind. Like, we are a leave no trace kind of society when it comes to crunchy granola types that do these big hikes. What are you doing? And I think it's because physically it's too demanding to take your garbage down. It's tons. We're not talking a bag or 2. Each Sherpa is pulling 2 tons of garbage off.
Really?
Every year. It's disgusting.
They're starting to pull the bodies down because global warming is melting the snow.
Ice fields, yeah.
It's uncovering the graves.
That concerns me because weather has proven to be cyclical. So we must be nearing the end. Like, what's next is what we all should be preparing for.
I'm thinking the Sherpas don't have to bring them down anymore. We pack up a handful of cannibals from the Indonesian islands.
Take them up.
This is called Frozen Dinner Night. We'll project a movie onto the ice.
We'll create Wendigos.
Date night. Night for the cannibals. They get to have a frozen dinner.
Nothing's better than frozen food.
Yeah. It's quick, it's convenient.
Yeah.
Beamer sickles.
Imagine the tomahawk steaks off of that guy. All right.
Okay, actual weird news. You going first? You want me to?
I'll go ahead and run with it. Well, yeah, I'll run with this one. You went first on the last one. Okay, I've got a couple of acronyms. FEIC.
Hold on. I don't know.
You got me.
Oh, it's fantastic. The Flat Earth International Conference.
That would be a fun one to go to.
And then you've got the Flat Earth Society, the FEC.
I've heard of that.
Flat Earthers are gathering money and people. They're in 2020, they're going to get a cruise liner. They're going to the ice wall. Going to the Antarctic to see the ice wall and prove us all wrong.
Standing.
And so if you're not familiar...
They better have a lot of money. Because...
Well, they've got rappers and all sorts of... Now, if you're not familiar with the Flat Earth, I want you to picture a plate, okay? Now, on the plate, you're looking down at it, and right in the middle of the plate is the Arctic area, North Pole and whatever, the Arctic ice shelf. And then the continents all flow out from that in the different directions. And then the whole rim of the plate is Antarctica. It's an ice wall that keeps the water on. Otherwise, the water would fall off and that'd be it. Right? But it's that ice shelf. So,
and is it space that keeps the ice wall frozen?
Good question. It's probably because the sun doesn't go around the plate. The sun circles around the plate on a vertical plane, heliocentric to the center of the plate. But how does the seasons change then? Does the sun circle this way and then every once in a while it kind of just wobbles on one side and then wobbles on another? See, they don't account for things like that. But anyways, I want to join the Flat Earth Society and go on a cruise.
You just want to be a part of the exploration?
Yeah, and go on a cruise.
No.
I think that'd be cool.
I think that they're an interesting group of people. And I did watch the new Flat Earth documentary. And I think that documentary, first of all, was very well done.
That's what I hear. I hear it's really well
because
done.
It's very...
I watched the Michael Jackson documentary.
I watched that too. Oh, that's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
Changed my mind about a lot of things. But the Flat Earth
documentary... What did it change your mind about?
I always thought that people were just after Michael's money.
Uh-huh.
And although I still think that, I think that
they were after his money because he blew out a few O-rings?
Yes.
Yeah, pretty sure.
That's pretty gross to say it like that.
Pretty sure.
But I think that Michael was a very sick individual, and that his power and prestige and his money and national sensationalism, he was able to cover up some really, really horrible things that he did.
Yeah, I mean, look at that, all the rulers.
Right. And I think that that's sad. But it changed my mind.
We should not question our betters.
It changed my mind about a couple of things. But the Flat Earth documentary was interesting to me because they had a scientist come on who really summed it up. And he said, we want Flat Earth as part of our scientific. Not because you're crazy and we want to change your mind, but because you're doing the scientific work to try and prove a theory.
You're thinking outside of the box.
Right. You're thinking. That's what scientists do. We don't take anything at face value.
See, the problem with Flat Earthers is they all shoot for one goal.
Right. And then they try to fill in the pieces.
And then when that goal's not met, they say, obviously, my test was right.
Right. And the scientist said that, he said, we have to tell you that as a scientific community, we're sorry. Which I was like, at first I was like, and then he explained himself. He said, we've not been paying enough attention to your question because we're doing other things.
Yeah.
We have many, many projects that we are legitimately working on, and we're sorry that we haven't laid out for you the exact proof that's going to be required by this group of thinking minds to bring you up to speed with what we actually know about the Earth.
Yeah, it's confusing how they got there. That's what confusing. How'd they get to that point to where the Earth has to be flat? Do they just see the world on that small of a scale? Is it more... Because the way I see it is, if you see the universe and the galaxy as vast as it is, you got to realize that you're insignificant. And I think when you go to Flat Earth, that you're the center. And you're different than everything else out there. You've got to be like pushing the Browns, saying, I'm more important than significant.
It has a lot to do with conspiracy, and a lot of previous conspiracy theorists have kind of all grouped up to be this Flat Earth Society.
But what conspiracy?
That they don't want us to know what's on the other side of the ice shelf for whatever reason. I don't...
Well, we all know it's a secret military base.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of Hitler's hideouts.
Well, that's on the dark side of the moon, though. We all know this. I've seen Iron Sky.
We watch the History Channel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Flat Earth documentary was really great. It did not bode well for Flat Earthers.
Well, how can
because they actually grouped together. They collectively were able to come up by crowdfunding $20,000 to buy this specific measuring device to measure the fact that the Earth is not moving on an axis. And it measured that it was.
Yeah.
And the scientist said, I'm sorry that you guys did all of that because we have one of those.
Yeah, I could have told you.
You could have come and physically, had you come to us, we're sorry we didn't pay attention to you.
When they could have started out in Vegas, where their conference ought to be. Where else you can have a conference?
Should have been a Comic-Con.
Yeah. They could have started there and bought 2 plane tickets and 2 sticks measured at the exact same length and 2 cell phones and flew one guy south to just outside of Mexico City and one guy north up to Montana and run the sticks into the ground the same depth and then 2 measuring tapes that are the same and measured the shadow. They would have found out they're wrong. That's it. That's how it was found out in the beginning, was length of shadow.
So they're interesting as a group. The documentary is very... I thought it would be like all for flat earthers.
And they're all kind of normal-looking people. That's the one that freaks me out. Because you expect them... Well, some of them aren't.
Yeah, except for the previous president. And
then he became president of the Flat Earth Society?
Following becoming president. You can find his videos on YouTube. Melts. Really? Like David Icke...
on TV saying, on Jesus.
Except he's angry, David Icke. He melts down on you. So I think that they are made up of nobody that is scientifically inclined to actually make these claims, but an interesting group nonetheless.
That's insane.
Yeah.
All right.
My weird news has nothing to do with melting flat earthers.
Well, yeah, we've gone through Flat Earth and Cannibal TV dinner.
Gross. So gross.
Maybe if I go up there, I could wear one of those aluminum foil suits.
Oh, yeah.
And then I look like a Beto's burrito.
They are good.
No, we're not knocking Beto's. So, this headline reads, contact lens stuck in woman's eye for 20 years.
Oh.
You ever lost anything?
Like in the side of the eye? Or
So, this woman...
Did it get bacteria?
This British woman goes to the doctor because she's got this cyst-like thing forming in her eyelid. And they do all of her scans. The doctor can feel it. It's definitely a cyst. So they do all of these scans. And in one of the scans, it clearly shows this white, what looks like a cyst. The doctor says, well, we're going to have to biopsy that. We may as well take it out. It's kind of benign. It doesn't look like it's attached to anything else.
So they have to cut the eyelid off.
So she goes in, and they remove it. And the doctor's like, you're not going to believe this. It was a contact lens. 42-year-old woman says she lost it when she was 14.
Oh, my gosh.
During a badminton.
How bad did her eye look?
It really just looked like a little bump. Bump right there, but what it had done is the body had encapsulated this lens.
Or an object.
Yeah. And so she said she lost it when she was playing badminton. She boom, it hit her in the eye, and she lost it then and never did find it. She never did find it, and her body actually just encapsulated it.
Oh.
There it was.
Does it hurt wearing contacts?
28 years later. I guess it depends.
I think the weirdest part of that story to me is the fact that she remembers the day she lost it. Oh, you know what? When I was 14, I got hit in the eye. And I have
the contacts.
It must have been.
Well, that was contacts 20-something years ago.
They were already
expensive.
You're right. You'd remember that you lost a $50
because you came home and told your old man, and he probably
beat you for a
blew
week.
his top.
So this is apparently a thing. So a 67-year-old woman found 27 of them in her eye last night.
27?
So, okay.
It would be a stack that big.
27. What does she never take them out? She just pops a new one in every day?
They're disposable. They dissolve. Biodegradable eyes.
Yeah, apparently she misunderstood the doctor.
So here's what she said. She told the doctors that when she'd go to take her lenses out at night, sometimes she simply couldn't find them.
And that didn't become concerning.
So she just kept putting more in. I don't know which story's worse. One that's been in there for 28 years or 27 of them.
That girl thought she lost a contact due to sports. The other lady just kept popping them in.
And she literally told her doctor, sometimes he was like, what? Doris?
What's up?
Why do you have... I'm going to count these for you, Doris. We need to have a talk.
For prescriptions, you got to bring the old ones in, and then I'll give you the new ones.
27.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. People, if I have anything, even just an eyelash hair in my eye, I notice it. I would notice 27 contact lenses. Yeah. Or one mysterious one. You would think that maybe she just thought it was from the badminton hit. Yeah. That it hurt and was just, go to the doctor.
Could be in there knocked up on the top.
Go, especially if you're wearing a lens and suddenly, oh, well, I was hit in the eye, can't find my lens. If you can't find your contacts, cautionary tale. Don't put another one in. Oh, don't wait 28 years. Like, just go to your local place.
How many was in there again? 14?
27. 27 contacts.
People are amazing, just when you think that...
Freaking humans! Yeah, just when you think we're as strange as we can get.
Kept stacking them. Look like pancakes at IHOP.
Yeah.
Like she blinks and just...
It'd be like a telescope.
Yeah. Like, where are these going?
Yeah. Hey, John. Oh, he's way over there.
Weird. Oh. All right, bless you.
All right, so today's Bigfoot.
We'll just go right into Bigfoot.
Into Bigfoot.
Oh, Les had the story of the people
Everest. That was my weird news.
People thought.
I just ran away with it because I started thinking about TV dinners.
It's so gross. I don't know how you can go from people thawing to TV dinner. The way your mind works is one of the strange things in the universe.
I'm excited today. Today we're talking about Bigfoot.
It's been kind of a long time coming.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a long time with the podcast, but just a long time since. I've been talking about Bigfoot for years.
Well, and the podcast, we've been going for a while now. We've kind of held off on Bigfoot because which way do you want to go with it?
See, and that's the hard thing when it comes to Bigfoot. Which way do we want to go with this? Should we just kind of go every different direction, or should we just kind of pick a direction and go with it?
Well, I think in order for it to be like a broad cover, we have to kind of cover all of it.
Well, let's start with the beginning. Like 61 years ago, in 1958, I believe them there, when a small development or the survey place out there in Humboldt, California, first come across the large footprints, and it gets coined Bigfoot. There was no Bigfoot before that.
So a survey
company in California, and I believe in Humboldt County.
He just comes across like this big, I'm sure he sees a lot of footprints back then as he's developing, and
they're out there, they're laying some roads, and they're way back up in the hills in southern California, and they come across.
And Humboldt County is in the hills.
In the hills. And they come across some very large footprints.
Okay, so that immediately cuts out the footprint because.
Well, does it?
Well, or does it begin the footprint hoax?
Yeah.
Well, it may have started there, but that had to have been a legitimate footprint. Or what kind of crazy guy is out there making a big footprint?
What if he's a dink boss, right? He's out there, oh, look, there's a deer, that's a this. And oh, look, there's a bear. And one of his juniors so he gets to whittling on a piece of wood and whittles out a couple of flip-flops that look like Bigfoot. And just takes a walk for the next day for his boss to find. Because that has been proven that's happened a few times. You can even go on and look.
Yes.
Is it Gimli has a pair of flip-flops?
Bob Gimlin has them.
Yeah, he has a pair of, not flip-flops, but a pair of wooden that he carved footprints into, like fingerprints, into these that he would wear and have someone pull him behind a truck at like 3 miles an hour.
So he just get the larger stride. So there's been a lot of people that have gone to really, like crop circles. We can take about crop circles. You know what? They're probably, and when I say probably, I want to believe in Bigfoot more than anything. I really want to believe.
She wants to be abducted.
I'm with you. I want to believe in Bigfoot.
That's kind of weird. But, they've got that area of Bigfoot too, the weird area. But when they go back and after the first sighting, that says right here, his name is, and I'm bad with names. I think it's age catching up. The reporter's name was Genzoli, and I'm probably butchering it, but he said that he simply thought this mysterious footprint story made for good Sunday morning reading. But the surprise was that it blew up, and the Humboldt Times journalist Betty Allen published a follow-up article about the footprints, and loggers started coming forward and talking about.
So loggers have probably seen that stuff all the time.
These are the people that are in the hills all the time, more than hunters, more than anything. They're carving new roads to get to new cuts, and they're going further and further and further back. So,
and often
untouched, pristine woods.
Yes. So we're not talking. They're like walking into someone's backyard. This is some of these stories from these loggers are hell and gone.
Yeah. They're living a hard life in the back, and they're coming across things and animals and situations that most people just weren't coming across at the time. But so it spreads after Bigfoot comes out, and it gets all this notoriety through all the papers, and it spreads like wildfire. It's a neat, fascinating story.
Mm-hmm.
These are stories that we haven't heard of, and everybody loves a good monster story. And then once these people start coming forward and saying, hey, look, you know what, we found this, or we saw this, or I think I saw this, other people started coming saying, hey, and it's not just in Northern California, it's all the way through the Pacific Northwest up into Canada, all across Canada, and it moves all the way across, and even into Florida with the skunk ape.
Yep.
There is only 2 states that have not had Bigfoot sightings. One is Hawaii.
Huh.
As well, you know what? If Bigfoot was on that island,
you'd see the smallest thing there.
Yeah, he would be exactly
the smallest primate there.
And I am not sure, but I think Panama, not a state now.
No, Panama's.
What is? Then we have
we've got Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico is the other state that does not have.
But they've got the chupacabra.
Yeah, so maybe they have their version of it.
They might Now, on Bigfoot, do you think, just a side note, do you think Bigfoot is the Gigantopithecus? We do know the Gigantopithecus existed.
It is a real animal.
Yes, we know it existed. We know it was there. We know it was like a 12-foot tall ape, a simian. We know a lot about it. We know its diet. We know all this stuff from what we found. And we do know that, well, we're not sure, but I've read that they're pretty sure that modern human and Gigantopithecus existed together in China.
So maybe it's a recessive gene.
But how would we have the China gene?
In the evolution pattern of the Gigantopithecus, where evolutionarily it maybe took a break, but it's
popped back out.
It's kind of popped back out because we've proven 100% that, I could be clipping along and all of my kids could be one way, and then, recessive gene shows up, got a 6-foot Nordic looking kid, and, I'm African American.
It's got the brow ridges and everything.
It happens. Like, recessive genes do come back, depending on expression.
Where would it come from in the North American continent?
Were there any other, were they breeding with other animals? Do we have any...
I don't know if we ever really had simians over here, ever, historically.
I guess you go back to the different camps, you want to call it, or the different ways that they look at Bigfoot. You've got the Gigantopithecus, that he's an ape. And then you've got that he is that missing link between the Neanderthal and where we are now. And then you have the deal that Bigfoot's an alien and probably flies that spaceship that leaves the crop circles.
Yeah.
There's related with the
when you saw
glowing
crazy
orbs.
crop circles, that's when Bigfoot got into some mushrooms.
Now, if we go with the primate aspect of it, then I honestly believe that it's right. He migrated across
he would have come across
the Bering Straits, through Canada, down in Alaska, just all the way down, migrated down.
He'd have followed the humans, or
led the humans, or followed, or
been next to them,
or even they cohabitated side to side. Now, if you go into Native American lore, Bigfoot, you can go back and look at the pictographs, the drawings or carvings or stories or totems up in Alaska, different. Bigfoot's there. He's right alongside the coyote, the wolf, the bear, the walrus, all the other animals. There's Bigfoot right in there. Why would that be there if he wasn't a reality?
Right, because historically they have always separated their godlike creatures from their land-born, can see them everyday creatures. If you look, especially in totems, in totems, it's
and he's present in totems.
He's present with the creature set that we still see today.
He's right alongside the elk, the moose, the buffalo, right along with everything. So, in the Native American and the Inuit people, I believe they're called the Inuit people from there. That was part of the deal. They cohabitated. They lived side by side. So maybe, and these are all oral stories that are handed down generation after generation, and they go back for, I don't know, as long as there were language, I guess, in these tribes. So they were an everyday part. So there was nothing for them. And then the white man comes along, the prospectors, the surveyors, railroad
developers,
the hunters,
And so actually, I guess where it comes into our culture is with the pioneers and the settlers and the explorers in the early, as far as probably in the 1700s, late 1700s.
You had trappers
breaking
west, breaking beyond the Mississippi.
And you can find in old writings throughout history books and all throughout mention of these ape-like creatures. And if you go to the camp that he is the primate, like we're talking about, they do display and exhibit signs that mountain gorillas, chimpanzees, the bonobo, orangutan, there are similarities in all of their behaviors. Mm. Or you go with the Native American version of it, and he's our brother. He's just another species of human that we cohabitate with. And a lot of people say, well, you can't have them side by side. Well, there's still natives in Borneo, on a small island, Borneo, that are throwing spears at airplanes, and they killed the missionary. Did you hear that story? Yeah. About the guy that's like, oh, I'm going to come, and they killed him because these people are still wearing loincloths, if anything at all. They're making bows and arrows. They barely have tools past fire.
They have a language all their own.
All their own. So
anybody.
You brought up the mountain apes. I think that is a great
When were they discovered? When was the gorillas discovered?
In that, they were legend and myth until 19...
Yeah, it was in the 1900s, like the 20s or 30s.
I was going to say, it might have been as late as the 40s when somebody finally brought one out.
Yeah, and they were legends. So
they literally had the same precept as Bigfoot.
Now,
people would see them. People would have. Yeah. They would have these experiences. Yeah. They would smell them.
Yeah,
and nobody would believe them. Yeah. And then someone shows up.
With lots of animals, the scent is another form of communication. Mm-hmm. They're marking their territory. They're letting you know that they're ready to rock. You know, hey, I'm in heat. Deer put off in the rut. They have that map, the stink. Other animals rub on things. They leave their scent. Bears,
moose are terrible smelling creatures.
They
dogs
usually smell
everything inside.
Yeah, and some types of dogs like beagles, they have been bred for hunting. They actually release a pheromone. Mm-hmm. Very similar to spiders and things. They're just stinky little animals. But that's another thing that people reported with the mountain gorillas, mm-hmm. that people still report with Bigfoot.
Yeah,
the smell.
It's the skunk ape.
And that's where I think the term skunk ape comes from.
They say the smell is not because they're unhygienic. It's because that's a form of communication and marking of territory. And, well, you know what? A wet dog smells like a wet dog. Mm. I'm not saying that wet dogs don't stink, but they're not pungent. And they're not
I know being up and close and personal with, harvesting of an animal. There's a smell.
There's a smell.
Yeah. Well, and then I think outside of that, the gorillas and all of that subset of species also communicates in other ways. Yeah. Similar to Bigfoot. Like there's tons of people who say they've had big rocks thrown at them or rocks left. Like we talked about the one earlier. They caught a picture of what they feel is a juvenile Sasquatch on a deer camp. So his wife said, well, let's leave 3 donuts out there and see what happens. And the reason they picked donuts is because near this deer camera
is a police station.
No. They were chumming them
I'm sorry, I was just jumping.
They had a feeder, and they think that it had been there to get the corn, which had been dipped in a really sticky, sweet substance.
Well, it had fermented.
So they left 3 donuts out there, and the following day they went back, and the donuts were gone, but there were 3 small rocks placed on the log. And then people have just been kind of sitting around. There's a video on YouTube.
And cops aren't known to buy donuts.
Or buy donuts.
At all.
And got 7-Eleven.
Keep them getting robbed.
While the cop ate, he might have just been kicking rocks. And that game of chance. If the universe is that big, it will happen.
True.
And those rocks landed.
Could be. So, and then they say that
cops and Bigfoot donuts.
There's a video on YouTube. These guys are just, videotaping kind of the end of their hike, and a giant rock comes flying into, right into their circle near the fire. And the one guy said, "Did you throw that?" And the other guy's tying his shoes. He's like, "Throw what?" And he's like, "The big rock." And then another one gets logged in right on camera.
Oh.
And they're like, "Who's throwing rocks?" And so they're like, hey, yelling into the distance, like, "Who's throwing rocks?" And they went out, spread out, and searched. They found nobody. But 3 big rocks come lobbing into this circle.
Now, there are stories of the skunk ape being able to talk.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that too. Communication.
What's that lady's name we talked about? She was a...
Jane Goodall. No?
Not Jane Goodall. Yeah.
She talked to monkeys.
We'll call her Jane Goodall of the Louisiana Creole venture. But anyway, her stories, I think she lived in Florida, but she had a family of skunk apes that would come visit her all the time. She talked about she would communicate with them.
Like English language communicates?
That's what it sounded like.
It kind of goes back to where even with the Native Americans, they did share a fundamental language. Like they had this in the Oregon Territory before it was a state. They had what was called the Spokane people. Now the Spokane people were basically just the Native Americans that lived in that area, which there were several different tribes of the Native Americans or the Indians, you want to call it. But they all spoke a different language, but a similar dialect. Mm-hmm. So there was some overlap. Now, let's say that you had the Sasquatch, which was generally taller, hairier, more aggressive, and even known to be cannibals. So there probably was some trade, some barter, and some communication with them. So I can see where the basis for a language would be there. There would be the ability to communicate. If you spent the time with them, you either learned their vernacular or they learned yours. Mm-hmm. So I think that if we all went to Mexico and got dropped off, within a few weeks, we'd be roughly communicating.
We'd be able to break down to...
We'd be able to stay fed.
So maybe it's just that.
Yeah, they're probably not sitting down on the porch going, "Hey, Betty, how you doing? I just thought I'd come out for a cigarette. You got one of them Pall Malls?"
Well, now... The natives talk about the red-haired giants. Mm-hmm. That was their cannibals. That was their cannibals. That was their Nephilim.
Yeah.
And do you think maybe that was the Bigfoot?
I think that's very possible.
I've often wondered that. Because they talked about the red-haired giants. Yeah. And the reason they called them red-haired giants was because the starkest contrast between the Native Americans and this other was it was a giant and it had red hair.
Reddish golden hair.
Interesting.
Now, Bigfoot sightings have been, a lot of people say that he's reddish gold hair. They range from black to brown to white to, there's been like a variety of them. And I think that if you have people like us, everybody's got slightly different hair color, slightly different eye color, slightly different stature. So Bigfoot's been reported as being 15 feet tall, or he's been as short as 4 feet tall. The Orang Pendek is a little ape-like,
The dwarf of the Bigfoot world.
And just like some people are super tall, some are small, some are heavyset, some are muscular, some aren't. You get Bigfoot sightings of everything you could imagine. Somebody has seen something like that.
And interesting.
Well, it's like bears. Yeah. Bears are black, brown. You'll have some black bears that are grizzlies. That are brown bears. You'll have some brown bears that are...
There was
black bears.
The guy that got arrested, he shot what he thought was a grizzly bear. Mm-hmm. And when they took the molars, is that how they do that? They take the back molars and the paw or something like that? Well, he took it in, he turned it in, they did the test on it.
No idea.
They come back and arrested him for taking a polar bear.
Yes.
And he's like, "No, this bear's this is a grizzly bear." They're like, "There's the bear." And they're like, "No, genetically this is
and it's crazy.
A polar bear."
They're so closely related, but Scientists, flat earthers, have figured out how to tell the difference between bears by their teeth. Between bears.
Well, if you look at it right now, every bit of Bigfoot DNA that has been turned in has come back human. 90+% human. Not.
Really? So they may just be...
And they blame it on
the evolutionary.
They blame it on contamination during the gathering. They've taken scat. They've taken what they believe to be blood. They've taken what they believe to be hair and skin tissue. And all of these have been tested. And
what if it's just a chromosomal marker defect?
Yeah.
Now, we've all seen that one guy that just doesn't look right. He's like, "Damn, that guy's 7 feet tall with the big old brown jaw, and he's got hair from head to toe."
Yeah, it's
hair.
Basketball players?
Yeah.
No, but there is a genetic expression that happens. It's generally in Spanish descent, but they grow hair on the palms of their hands.
Jojo the dog-faced boy. Yeah. They were in a circus. Him and his brother. It is a real condition.
It is an actual genetic expression. Most of us carry the gene. It's very seldom expressed. It takes a couple of different genetic markers for it to be expressed. Mm-hmm. That alone tells us that there's probably more to this whole Bigfoot scenario. Now, do you think that perhaps Bigfoot, as we know it, is a species, and the reason we don't see it is because it's just been on the brink of extinction for so long? Because the white rhino, people, if we cease to exist...
Only survive in captivity now.
Yeah.
And there's none in the wild.
Yeah.
If we cease to exist and we have no way to record this, people years down will say there's no such thing as a white rhino.
I think with a lot of the animals in Africa and on the plains, in I believe it was 1700s when the Europeans started, like South Africa. We set up ports because there was spices. And so I think, though, where Bigfoot in the Northwest, in Russia, in all those areas that are, and now we look at Russia, there are millions and millions of acres that are uninhabited. Still to this day, pristine.
Yeah.
Anything could be living in there untouched, undiscovered. The United States, when the colonies came over, and then the trappers, and there's really not anywhere here anymore that, I mean, there is, but there isn't. That's
so it's going to be in the Pacific Northwest.
Not so much in the United States. Canada probably has a lot of tundra. Tundra area is not inhospitable to us.
So do you think that the
your question was extinction, on the verge of extinction? I think that it would be one of those animals that is on its way out.
And do you think that because the expansion has been kind of westward is the reason that
most
of the sightings are still to this day in the Pacific Northwest?
They're pushed back into the remote
areas. Like perhaps they're doing like you said we did, just, kind of evolutionarily making their way there. Or
could be environment, could be the food source.
Yeah.
Now, they claim that Bigfoot does follow and migrates with the elk and the deer herds in the summer when the deer are down low.
Which would make sense.
Bigfoot's down low. When the winter times, or in the winter when, they go back and forth. Or, and I've got it backwards. Heavy. In the summer, they're higher because of the people in the population. They get, the deer, the elk, all them. They're like, look, you know what? We know
they go down towards the basins.
They go up. And
would Bigfoot be avoiding man out of intelligence, or would Bigfoot be skittish avoiding them?
I think he's probably every bit as intelligent as a deer that knows. A deer know the hunting season. You go down here in the hills and you see deer all day long, every day. And then the opening day, good luck. You'll stomp around the hills for 2 weeks and not see a deer.
Yeah.
After the season's over, you go outside and they're in your front yard. There's a 4-point in the front yard. Like, going in there.
Hit one in your car on the way
A guy I work with has a tame deer that lives in his backyard. Wild deer, but it comes up, and he's got pictures of it. It comes up and likes to be pet.
Yeah.
So, do you think that do you think that the Sasquatch is the same as like the grass monsters that they're finding? Do you think it's the same? Because there's really...
What's a grass monster?
The Ohio grassman.
Yeah.
In Ohio, the grassman is kind of their version of Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Okay.
But do you think that that's the same? There's really nowhere to hide.
We look at a lot of these places. There's New York. When you think New York, you think like downtown New York. You think Manhattan, Chicago, all those areas like that. I think that's but that's only a small portion of it. Is New York's really green.
Well, New York State's New York State's...
Ohio's kind of the same way. Ohio's got a lot of area that's not, like you think Columbus, Ohio, and you think these are in Ohio. And this Ohio grassman story goes back all the way till before Ohio.
I've never heard of the Ohio grassman.
Yeah, it's similar to Bigfoot.
It's a very similar Bigfoot story.
And then you've got another thing that I think is commonly brought up is the ley lines that run around the globe for flat earthers that run across the plate.
The grid.
You can see Bigfoot sightings closest to those ley lines. Like, they're clusters around them, like Sedona, Arizona.
Uh-huh.
Huge.
Okay, I've heard about these ley lines. One, how do you know if there's a ley line?
Well, they've tested the energy, the amount of energy.
Okay.
Magnetic field,
Questions just got more. 2, how do you test energy? Do you, lick the 2 prongs on the end of the ley line, just like what you did with the 9-volt battery? Or... how do they test the energy?
Okay, so...
Because here's my experience with all these, is you've got a hippie with a crazy notion that's trying to convince me of bullshit.
Somebody from Berkeley.
So, Alfred Watkins,
okay.
And the theory of ley lines. Let me lay it out.
Okay.
It was first suggested to the general public by an archaeologist named Alfred Watkins in the early 1920s. So, he's wandering around one day in Herefordshire circles.
Okay.
And noticed that many of the local footpaths connected the surrounding hilltops in a straight line, similar to the Nazca line.
The footpaths go in a straight line.
And these are like ancient footpaths. They've just been used for centuries.
Yeah, shocking those people didn't meander as much as he felt they should have.
So what he saw is a pattern of alignment, and that's where the ley lines started. Since then, you can connect these lines by way of measuring the energy that they emit.
That's back to question 2. How do you measure the energy?
Well, let's see.
He's probably got some kind of...
See, that's what I think. Like, whenever someone tells me, I don't know what Reiki is and stuff, but when they tell me, okay, here's I should hold this. We'll wait for midweek to tell my exorcism.
So, Watkins theorized that these geometric lines connected monuments and other ancient
so what came first?
Sites.
Okay, what would come first in that? Okay, would it be...
So they say the pyramids you lay generally like on cross points of the ley lines because your levels are highest.
Okay,
it's a beacon
what would come first? The ley line or the monument?
It would have to be the ley line, because it would have to be the ancient people...
Knew the ley lines were there.
Like, for instance, Stonehenge.
They knew how to lick the battery.
Yeah,
Stonehenge
exactly.
sits geometrically, like there's a ley line, like 6 ley lines connect all together.
Oh, so you're telling me that
Let's
in
go all the way
ancient
back to
times...
Zachariah Stitchin.
In ancient times, we talked about it a couple weeks ago.
Did you? Yeah.
In ancient times, they built... Let's go with what they say Stonehenge is an astronomical calendar.
Yes, but we've already determined
I
it's where
know,
a crop
but
circle
let's
is.
say in ancient times they built an astronomical calendar, and then they're shocked that it has footpaths that lead directly to it.
Well, it's not just that, because these people can't
Because
cross.
I'm shocked that the
Oceans.
pyramid has footpaths directly to it. Shocked. I'm shocked that millions of people were employed to build it, or enslaved. I don't care what you believe on how it was built,
One way or the other.
but shocked that this giant structure was built and a footpath was to it.
So,
It sounds to me like he's a chicken or egg guy arguing for something different.
so they say they can detect a ley line by several means.
Man, okay, hold on.
The use of a pendulum,
Yeah, okay, I was going to say they probably use the
dowsing rods.
dowsing rods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had a great grandpa that did that.
We did. You know, I believe that animals are probably more susceptible to ley lines too. They're more sensitive to energy and stuff
Right.
like that. They can sense. They say that animals can sense things that are going to happen, like earthquakes or storms or
Right.
even ghosts, so they can see them.
Well, and what they found is these ley lines, having been around since the 20s, things like crop circles, they're clustered around these ley lines. Bigfoot sightings clustered around these ley lines. But not just Bigfoot sightings, the path that the goose follows in his migration follows a ley line exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say those would be navigational, because they do use the magnetic fields for navigation. Animals.
Right. So perhaps the ley lines have always been there,
Yeah.
and Bigfoot's just behaving like an animal.
Yeah. You know, I think when it comes to Bigfoot, a lot of people, there's just so many theories and there's so many stories, it's hard to cover anything. And for someone like me, I'm not a specialist. I just have listened and read so many books and I've met several people that claim to have Bigfoot experiences.
Well, and I think one thing that you'll find is that people who spend like loggers, for instance, a great amount of time in the forest, doing their things in the forest, are very perceptive to when something is off. And it's akin to if we came into this room and say the camera was there. We may not notice right away that something's off, but perceptively we would go, wait, what's
Well, imagine just a
here?
logger where his life depends on noticing intricate small
In
things.
Bluff Creek, the guys would go home for their weekends or have their time off. They'd go home, they'd come back, and they noticed that 55-gallon oil drums had been thrown down into the ravine. You know, drums that they're big enough and they're full of gas and diesel fuel and oil that, well, wait a minute, you know what? It took
300 pounds.
Took 3 of us to lift this out of the truck, and this has been thrown all the way down the bottom. Things have been turned over. Their equipment had been messed with. Things have been moved. They come back and they're like, wait, this is not the way we left our job site. So that was one of the deals.
Another thing that they're finding deep in the Canadian forest, there's a couple of Bigfoot hunters that are really diving into. They're finding trees that physically, I mean, it would take circumstances that would be completely out of our control to stack them the way that they've been stacked.
Yeah.
And some of them are stacked under pressure. So this tree's leaned over, and then others are stacked on top to hold it. One false move, and everything falls
Like
apart.
a booby trap.
Well, like perhaps primitive shelter.
Mm-hmm. Or they figure that Bigfoot might make a nest or some kind of really rudimentary shelter.
Yeah, nesting.
Or perhaps the way that we mark trails. You know, they stack these logs. So.
Or they let you know that this is our territory. This is where our clan is. Because just like not all people get along, like if you look at in Ireland, the Highlands and the Lowlands, the Highlanders hated the Lowlanders. This clan hated that clan. They did not get along. And it's all, not just in Ireland, but that's one that's I was reading about most recently. All Vikings, you know, or Nordics didn't get along with each other.
Sure.
They didn't just go out and pillage and plunder other countries. They started with their neighbors.
Yeah.
They moved up and down the coast.
I think it was like once every 6 years they would have a big kind of meetup. And that's the only time.
But it was only to trade. Yeah. It wasn't because they were friendly and wanted to
trade and to worship.
Out. Yeah.
Trade and worship. And then the rest of the time it's like, you know what, we catch you on your own, you're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or slaves.
Or slaves, yeah.
And back to the hair that's been found, it's not generally found on the ground.
No,
I mean, 8 foot in a tree, and then it comes back to being humanoid.
Yeah.
Like who's in the tree?
Yeah.
Leaving their hair samples behind.
And I'd hate to think that Bigfoot's on the brink of extinction.
I think that there is so much more to our universe, specifically our world that we live in, that perhaps if we looked at the way we look at the world as if we were a small ant colony, we could understand that there's so much out there. And perhaps, perhaps Bigfoot has been pushed through the centuries, living alongside Native Americans for hundreds of years. Then, the settlers come in, the trappers come in, the lands are, the trees are decimated to create farmland, so they're pushed further northwest.
Well, let's say too that the Bigfoot or this race has been alienated by the Native American, who's more like the white man. They get to the point where first they're kind of fighting, they're battling it out, and then they kind of cohabitate, and they figure, okay, you know what, you give us some whiskey, we'll give you some shiny beads, you will teach you to plant the crops, this, that, and the other, we'll work for you, we can be integrated into your society and become a part of it. Let's say you're 7 feet tall, covered in hair, and smell horrible. You know what I mean? You're just not. You fit the pattern. You know what I mean? We don't want you marrying my daughter. I don't want you for a brother-in-law. So Bigfoot became a little more, or Sasquatch became a little more alienated. So he didn't quite fit into the mix. So he's pushed back.
And that would almost instantly stop his evolution.
They're killed.
Or change its path.
They're ridiculed. They're shunned. They're pushed out. They're hunted. They develop a hatred for the Native American and the white man anymore. So they're not...
Well, for humans.
For humans, yeah. So they pull away and they become more elusive, which is just it goes on like that. Or you go back and you go this avenue, the government cover-up. Like you say, there's probably so much more out there we don't know. Maybe NASA has found aliens, and we do have spaceships at Roswell, and all these stories are true, but the government has done them disinformation. Let's say we do. Let's say we find out that out here on the Rio Tinto property, there's a family of Bigfoots living. Mm-hmm. What happens next?
Yeah.
What happens? Do they have to shut Rio Tinto down?
They're hunted.
To preserve the territory? Because we had some buck-toothed ground squirrel or something out here in the desert that they went and closed off thousands of acres of national park because too many people out there driving their ATVs and walking around hiking interferes with the breeding population of this squirrel.
What if it's as simple as that, the theory of daemonic reality, meaning that as a whole conscious, we're only shown what we can comprehend, and then our intelligence is cyclical in nature. So as we gain more intelligence, more is revealed to us.
So what if Bigfoot's like on a different kind of dimension?
Well, he's a different plane. He's a demon.
Or just outside of what we can comprehend.
He glimpses in once in a while, but most outside.
See, and you know what? A lot of people believe that he fades in and out, like into an interdimensional being where our realities cross, when it gets thin. But I still think that it's probably more likely that he's a big dumb ape.
Yeah, and
more like a Gigantopithecus.
More like a Gigantopithecus.
Timid. The Gigantopithecus was hominid that ate strictly vegetables and roots.
And people that study the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, Yeti, have all basically come to that conclusion that, listen,
and maybe
we have so many untapped lands. We've pushed him further back.
Well,
we haven't found him possibly on the brink of extinction.
Maybe we haven't even really pushed him that much. Maybe he just maybe it just lives in denser woods where we
maybe
don't
that's
go
the
very
habitat,
often.
yeah.
That's just the habitat they live that they evolved in, because the Gigantopithecus supposedly was in the really dense areas of Asia.
Yeah.
Asia Major and some in Asia Minor. What have you? Just in the really dense forest areas. That's where it lived. And we do have a common ancestor that goes back a couple of leaps that was a 7-foot tall hominid that, and maybe the Sasquatch is a break off of that line, kind of how the Neanderthal is a break off of the Homo erectus.
Most of that is driven by necessity. Evolution is driven by necessity.
Mm.
We evolve because that's how our species survives.
Yeah, necessity, mistaking survival. A mistake is made in the genetic line, but that mistake fares well.
Yeah. Interesting. I want Bigfoot to be real.
I do too.
I personally do.
I think Bigfoot's real to the people who believe. If you believe
or
it,
the people who have had an experience.
That's the crazy part too. There are so many. There's probably hundreds of thousands of Bigfoot experiences.
Yes.
And sightings and stories, and I've heard so many of them. And I've come down to the point sometimes where let's say after Bluff Creek, and he became public, and that's in the late 50s and 60s there. So more and more people come out. And then in the 70s, he became the Legend of Boggy Creek, Return to Boggy Creek. There's a couple other Bigfoot movies that come out, and there's all kinds of. Leonard Nimoy hosted one in search of Bigfoot. There was all those Bigfoot documentaries that come out, so he got more and more exposure. Into the 80s, he comes out. It's Harry and the Hendersons. Mm-hmm. He's the big, lovable. He's different, but he's kind of like us. That's probably pretty close.
Red hair,
depiction.
has a white mustache.
That's probably a pretty close depiction of what Bigfoot is. That's what he's described as.
Okay, if I had a Bigfoot experience, don't get me wrong, even though I've never heard of Bigfoot attacking people, I would probably crap my
Me right off the bat, with what I've seen outdoors, I think it was a bear immediately.
That's the first thing.
And I think some people do.
Yeah.
Therefore I would be low.
Well, and I think that even though he's not got a bad reputation.
He didn't up until more stories come out where he's there's more of an aggressive Bigfoot, more of a people that really feel like or maybe we don't know. David Paulides, you're familiar with him in the 411 stories?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, he never comes out and says in any of his books and his documentaries.
It's thought every story you read.
He never comes out and says, Bigfoot did this, Bigfoot took him, Bigfoot, But you come out and Bigfoot does not so we would like to think he's Mr. Harry and the Henderson. I think it's probably some of them are.
But we do that with every animal.
Every animal.
Every animal. I mean,
Bambi.
Bears.
They're just
bears
so
are friendly.
The guy that went and lived with the bears got killed by the bears he lived with.
Yeah.
They got bear guy. They're just misunderstood. Look, they've accepted me. Yeah, you're a snack.
Well, and even the monkey lady
pays
all those monkeys, and then it rips her friend's face off.
Yeah, the lady that had.
Mm-hmm.
But so we've got the friendly Bigfoot, like Harry and the Hendersons. He's just misunderstood, and I believe a lot of people probably believe they had sightings of something like that, or I don't know. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It's really hard to tell. But then you've got the cannibalistic Bigfoot that's stealing your children to eat them.
I've never heard any of those.
Cannibalistic, or the angry Bigfoot that comes down in the night and beats on the side of your house and breaks out your windows and chases you out of the hills. And hundreds of these guys, hunters, my favorite hunting story is, Bigfoot hunting stories. There's a guy, he doesn't say where he's from, and he never gives his name because he doesn't want to be made fun of. But he's elk hunting. He sees the monster bull. He shoots it. It takes off on a run. It goes up over the ridge where he knows he's going to find it. It's dropped. Well, he comes up over the ridge. He sees the blood trail. Something down in the bottom looks like bear, maybe. He believes that bear's probably got my elk. So he throws his rifle down and he gets in the scope, and just in time to witness what is not a bear, grab it by the rack, grab it by the jaw, snap its neck. That's bears aren't known for snapping bull elks' necks.
They can't manipulate.
Yeah.
That way.
So they don't need to. You know how bears kill, don't you?
Well, it's definitely not by twisting its neck.
They generally sever the spinal cord.
Yeah,
bears.
They've got.
Bears go for your stomach.
Oh.
That's
Unless
terrible.
you're a menstruating female.
And then they don't?
Then they go for elsewhere.
How do we know this?
I've heard wolves are the same way. And coyotes and
Wolves,
other animals.
We've had
wolves go
enough-
for the throat.
Go
We've
for
had
the
enough
southwest.
women eaten by bears that we've tested theory.
You know, there have been more
Ladies.
Bigfoot
Because
sightings
of-
than bear attack stories reported.
Yes.
Bears are strong enough and formidable enough to take you down.
They can just
You're not a
enjoy
threat.
you slowly.
And a moose is not a threat. Bears are so powerful and so big, they don't have to
Oh.
worry about that. So they eat you slow. And they eat what they like.
Then they bury the rest. I've heard that now that you mention it. That sounds familiar. They'll save the rest. Soft tissue first.
They go for the stomach. Bear, if I'm ever eaten by any animal, I don't want to be a bear.
Or a shark.
Yeah. Shark. Definitely not a shark. So,
Have you ever seen the novels written about?
You know, that was one of the things, too, that there's the romance novels. Like, there's Bigfoot porn. There's...
Betsy, there are Bigfoot Harlequin
you
romances for
sent
women.
me one. Some things I cannot unsee.
I saw that and I thought, what are you people writing about?
Those are the best.
Humans. There's something wrong with the people that wrote those books.
I would say more there's something wrong with the people who read them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
the
can't.
guy that wrote them for the guy that drew them.
Yeah.
You know, with Bigfoot, it's one of those things where it comes from myth, it comes from legend, and then it comes from the media, and then I think prior to the Bigfoot becoming so popular with the exposures in the 60s and 70s, it was one of those things that a lot of people say that they lived with and they never talked about. In the South, there's people that's like, they've been on the properties forever. Some of these old families back there have hundreds of acre farms that have swamps and backcountry, and the climate's right. It doesn't get too cold. It doesn't get too hot. And Bigfoot can live in an environment
and they just never talked about it.
And
never
also-
talked about it. They didn't want to be ridiculed. It was one of the things. It's normal.
They just knew.
Like,
And
you don't
also
talk
back
about
in-
the cows in the pasture out back, because it's natural. It's an everyday thing. So was Bigfoot to their families growing up.
Also back then, the gatekeepers for media, the average person out of media.
Yeah. It was a
You couldn't, or you didn't commonly see just the average guy giving his take on what's going on in 20s.
Yeah. Nobody cared.
I mean,
We're working.
right now. We're in the time of the Gutenberg press.
Yeah.
We're in the time of revolution right now. There's a revolution in humanity because us three here, just regular people, none of us went to school for this, specialized in this, born into a family that had historically this kind of advantage, are communicating.
We've developed a platform. You guys have developed a platform to express beliefs, thoughts, ideas, which they really never had 10 years ago. This was kind of breaking ground with YouTube, and there was a few podcasts. Yeah. So you're right. We are in a revolution now and in a few minutes, this will be online, and people from here to Australia to China, anywhere that they have internet access, and they go, oh, wow, this podcast, I'll click on that.
Yep.
And then they'll listen. They'll go, oh, those guys are kind of funny. Dude's an idiot, but, he doesn't know about Bigfoot. I've seen one, or I'm an anthropologist.
And with regard to all of the sightings, it reminds me of the saying that 10,000 Chinamen can all be wrong.
Yeah.
And
that's
there's
the thing.
too many sightings for this to be a phenomenon.
It's 10,000 Chinamen can't all be Wong.
Pretty close, but I get the point.
But they can, and they are. So I think that if there were 3 reports and then some guy came out, which, by the way, I'm not real fond of him. Like that Gremlin?
Bob Gimlin.
Gimlin.
He
was a known prankster.
He has a shady history, and he discredits anything. Maybe he really has seen Bigfoot. Maybe he really can.
Maybe he really saw Bigfoot and says, I got to get this word out, and so he went and got a
But
suit.
he's a jerk because he took all the steam out of the actual people wanting to understand Bigfoot.
Now, you go back to
deflated it.
You go to the Roger Patterson film.
Yeah.
That is the most studied piece, I think,
The
ever.
gate,
Ever,
regenerated
They did
gate.
everything to prove it or disprove it. And do you know what? It still comes back inconclusive.
Yeah.
Nobody can say either way, yes, this is real, or no, this is not. They're like, well, you know what? As far as I can tell, I look at that, and that's Patty.
Mm-hmm.
It's a female. It's got the, and they go back and they say, well, why would you make a Bigfoot suit with breasts?